Hello, everyone. Welcome to Designing for Divergence, Making Mentally Accessible Games. If you are here for any other panel, you are in the wrong place and should probably leave. We have a group of diverse developers from across the industry who all have various different reasons for being here, but we're going to help you understand what it takes to make games for everybody. If you're here looking for games for everybody, we're probably going to have some good recommendations for you. There are also going to be two versions of us in this panel. There's the version you are watching on screen, and there's the version on the chat. So if you have questions as the panel goes on, there will be people here from the panel able to answer you in real time. Welcome to the future. Just to go through introductions for everybody, I'm Jake. I'm a game designer in the suburbs of Philadelphia. The main reason that I'm here is I have ADHD and I have bipolar 2. And there's a very specific kind of game that I like, and there are games that just don't do it for me. So I was playing some of those games, and I thought, what would it be like to actually describe what that is and what that means? And now we're all here. We have 6 people from the industry to talk about that. Kelsey, why don't you go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kels. I own Peachy Keen Games, and we're making Calico, which is a magical girl cat cafe sim. I'm really passionate about accessible games, especially for people who have PTSD or anxiety and depression like I do. And then ADHD is a fun little sprinkle in there that also kind of complicates which games can work and which don't. Yeah.
ADHD is a lot of fun sprinkles. Jerry, what have you got?
Hi, I'm Jerry Bellick. I design alternative controller games and experimental games, as well as escape rooms and other kinds of installations and immersive storytelling kinds of things. I deal with general anxiety and depression and lots of ADHD, as well as some tics that manifest with trichotillomania and dermatillomania, and tinnitus. Why don't we just throw that in there?
It does happen a lot. I get the ringing in my ears all
Yeah.
the time. Alana, what have you got?
Hi, I'm Alana, rhymes with banana if you have an American accent. If you don't, it does not. I'm the founder of Team Toad House. We make visual novels that destigmatize mental illness. We're currently making a game where the main character has anxiety, and the whole idea behind it is to kind of expose people to therapy and tools they can use to manage anxiety. Myself have anxiety, a lot of people do. I also am very familiar with PTSD and bipolar disorder. Social anxiety, and I'm making that game as accessible as possible because I too believe that accessible games is just good game dev.
That's totally fair. Accessibility works for everybody. Kartik.
Hi, I'm Kartik. I'm an indie game developer, and I'm also a mobile game developer by day, and I have made a few accessible games, a few not accessible games. I've learned a lot through my experiences there, having been affected by PTSD and anxiety and depression, and I'm hoping to share some of my experiences and learn from everyone else on this panel as well.
And last but most certainly not least, Tiffany.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Otto. I'm the Director of Partnership for Indiecade. The reason I'm here is to talk more about temporary neurodivergent states. So we hear a lot about people have anxiety, people have bipolar, etc. But we don't always talk about how things in your life can temporarily make you a little more divergent than you normally would be. A famous one would be postpartum depression, or if you have a super stressful week. And we all work in video games and we all live in COVID, so we're familiar with those things. So I'm here to talk about more temporary states and how to design around those from maybe an office or business perspective, and how some games that you might love, you might not love right now, and that's okay.
That's very true. Not everything you deal with in your head, you deal with forever. So the reason this panel originally came about was I was playing open world games, and I was playing Ghost of Tsushima, and I'm like, wow, this game works really well for my ADHD. And I just started to think about why, and it was like, a lot of things keep you in the game, like the gentle breeze is your way to get from place to place. You never actually have to look at a map if you don't want to. you learn about new destinations because something will be like, oh, there's a golden bird that just flew in front of you. Do you want to follow it right now or not? Like, I don't need to think about that. I have ADHD. Yes, I'm going to follow the shiny golden bird. Are you kidding me? And it made me wonder, like, well, why that? Like, why not like Assassin's Creed? Why not like any other open world game? Why are those so bad for me? And why is this one so good? So can you think of any games that worked well for you? And if you can, what was so good about that games? Or what was so good about those games that did that for you?
I have a comparison actually, because #temporary states. So I am a longtime Sims player. I've been playing The Sims since it came out, and I love The Sims. But for me, The Sims is a game I fall into for 4 days. I wake up really hungry, wondering where the time's gone, and my parents are wondering if I'm still alive. The Sims 2 was my poison of choice. When COVID started, I couldn't get myself to pick up a copy of The Sims. And I'm like, this is so off-brand for me. I could only find myself playing games like Polytopia on mobile, which are like fast play, kind of like Advanced Wars, only like Civ and Advanced Wars had a really pixel-arty baby. Beautiful game, highly recommend. And then I picked up Horizon Zero Dawn. And it has taken me more spoons, more mental energy to pick up that game, but I sit in it for longer. Like, my casual day-to-day, because I used to be on the conference circuit. I had a very like go-get-em job, and with COVID, I can't do 90% of my job stuff. So this high stress and like that feeling of low productivity mimics a lot of feelings people get with depression, anxiety, etc. So for me, I found that something really deep, like and time-sucking, like The Sims, wasn't available to me anymore on an emotional level. I couldn't handle the level of mental arousal you'll need to handle that kind of game. So then I was playing games like Polytopia, but then it got to a point where that low level of arousal, that quick run through this game only lasts 4 minutes, wouldn't do it for me either. Enter Horizon Zero Dawn. I had similar experiences to Jake, where there were different ways to play the game. I could like hardline the critical path, or I could go and jump off all the shiny rocks like in Assassin's Creed and find all the Banuk stuff and just go chase machines. And since it gave me options, as my mental state changed, I had more ability to play that game. I have noticed, though, that I can't play it anymore because it involves too much emotional commitment for me to handle right now. So I've been playing a lot of Fight Crab, which is basically Tekken with weird physics for crabs. And as a result, the rounds are like 10 seconds.
We're not going to get into a panel about Fight Crab.
So my point is, like, as my mental state changed, the amount of like mental arousal I could handle changed. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure other people have similar thoughts. And since it's a more temporary state for me, like I couldn't adjust medication. I couldn't do that kind of thing. It was based entirely on my day-to-day.
With bipolar disorder, the definition is you go through cycles. So if you're in a low cycle, the games that I play in a low cycle don't do the same thing as when I'm in mania. Mm-hmm. So when I'm in mania, like Overwatch just itches really, really nice. Just 20 minutes, go, 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 go. But when I'm in a low state, Paper Mario or Pikmin feels really nice because it gives me a task and I finish the task and I go, good job, Lana, you did great.
And you throw confetti.
Then I'm good. Then I throw confetti.
Bringing it back to the open world stuff a little bit, I've actually been playing a lot of Horizon Zero Dawn right now, Tiff. I'm totally feeling part of what you're talking about, where like inside the world, I really like being able to explore the space kind of the way I want to, and it hasn't been super pushy about it. And there's just a lot of depth when it comes to dealing with the robots and how you explore, and it's pretty open in that sense. Like it's not gatekeeping a lot of the areas. The place that it does trigger me in some ways that Jake and I have talked about is the map. Like once I get to the giraffes, and giraffes are my favorite animal, so I beeline for giraffes. and then it shows all the icons, and all of a sudden my brain's like, you can't leave this area until you've done all the icons that fill in a particular geometric shape that feels right for no reason.
Yeah, Ghost actually does that too.
A little bit crazy, and but like I'm really enjoying the game. Other than that, Breath of the Wild though was one that didn't trigger that at all with me, and I was similar to what it sounds like for like Ghost of Tsushima, is being able to stay out of map, stay out of menus, and just like scamper around and chase squirrels and do the same things they do in real life when they're small animals. And that one was very, very satisfying, and being able to get lost and create my own stories. And for me, that's when I walk away from an open world game like that with my own story, that feels especially satisfying and valuable. Like it wasn't just kind of like candy calories of playtime.
I actually want to build off of what Jerry said with two particular statements regarding Horizon, because I agree. Once I opened the giraffes, and I made the mistake of purchasing the icon maps right as I left the Nora homeland. Like that was my first big purchase in game before weapons. I think I was like, yeah, icons, because I love Assassin's Creed. And I agree. Once the fog of war lifted, I was like, oh, that's a lot. But my brain digested them as that game where you have the dots and you put lines amongst the dots, like you go from line one to dot 1 to dot 2 to dot 3 to dot 4. Connect the dots. That's what, you know what?
A game called Connect the Dots? I mean, no, that was terrible of me. Everything is a game. That's fine. Go for it, Tiffany. Go ahead. My bad. I just take it back a little bit for a second.
Specifically the ones they give you on airplanes when you're a small child and they want you to be quiet. And it's like you connect the dots and it draws an airplane. It's not just the competitive connect the dots. Because I started playing it like, okay, we'll go to all the triangular shaped ones first. We'll just follow this map of triangles, which I now know are called cauldrons. But like it was a lot of that. And one thing that I think is really good, because we talked about designing for Divergence. I bought the collector's edition with the Frozen Wild expansion. Spoiler alert, there's an expansion. Second spoiler alert, there's a dude named Silence. That's the only spoiler here. And at one point, he says, if you enter the Frozen, so the Frozen Wild DLC was released after the game had already been completed. So you bought Horizon Zero Dawn, Frozen Wild was announced later, you loaded it, but I bought both on the same disc. So before finishing a key part of the path, I was like, you know what? I just want to complete everything. I want to go explore everything in case it all gets like on fire or something. I don't know. I just feel like I should go do everything else. And Silence tells you through your headset, he goes, as you approach Frozen Wilds, because you can either take a right to Frozen Wilds or a left to the critical path. And he goes, what are you doing, Aloy? Shouldn't you be doing XYZ for the critical path instead of going and messing about with the Banuk tradesmen? And what I think is really cool is your main character, Aloy, I didn't touch anything. Homegirl with Ghost Around Comms is like, I don't know, Silence. Maybe you hung out too much with the Banuk and that's why you don't want me to hang out with them. I do what I want. And she like goes through, and then the two main waypoints, like two main checkpoints that you meet in Frozen Wilds after that, you actually have a dialogue tree option like ask about Silence. And the first guy just says, that guy, he came through here once. And the second one goes, yes, we don't talk about him in these lands. And I think it was a really tight way of looping what could have been like anxiety-inducing completionist content into like, I'm playing this game how I want. Like I'm assuming if I'd gone back to the critical path, Silence would have been back in my headset going, you've made the right choice, Aloy. But like,
and what a good way to remind you what you should be doing in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Those menus are great. You have to go find them. Never lost in that game.
It lets you know what you should be doing, but also saying that we've thought about this and it's still okay. Like we're letting you, so it's still allowed and you can still do what you want.
Will definitely come back to playing games how you want. Kels and Kartik, do you have any games that work really well for you?
On a slightly different topic, but still on the topic of big games, like, we've all talked about pretty large open world games that have a lot of experiences. They're kind of inherently designed in such a way, or allow for design to be more accessible to a lot of wider range of people. And a game that I was playing recently with my partner, Path of Exile, which I wouldn't necessarily say is a game that immediately comes to mind when you think about accessible games, but one thing about it that makes it very surprisingly accessible is the variety of classes and the play styles built into it. Wherein I love to play where I'm just like clicking all over the screen constantly, really, really fast, just gives me something to like do something with my fingers really, really fast. Whereas my partner prefers to lay back, chill out and to do something a little bit more relaxed. So she plays the Necromancer, where all her little minions do all the killing for her. And we're playing almost two completely different games, but we still get to play together in spite of our different experiences and what we find fun. And I think that open world games like the ones we've just described, and multiplayer games, which have such a wide range of gameplay, have the opportunity to create these different experiences within the same game, and still let everyone enjoy it on their own terms.
Yeah, I mentioned Breath of the Wild. That was definitely a big one for me. There's something about it that I think Tiffany mentioned as well, is being able to choose what kind of like state you're in. And there are so many different kinds of gameplay that Breath of the Wild has. And I think about it specifically because in the Legend of Zelda series, while I did enjoy all of the other Zelda games so much, I really had to hug onto a tutorial online to be able to get through everything. It constantly forces you to remember what you're doing, like remember a thing a person told you and do that thing in that order, which can be really difficult. But with Breath of the Wild, it was just, I don't think I ever had to look at a tutorial. I just went through things. A big, like, amazing part is that if you see one of the shrines, you can use your indicator thingy to place a waypoint, which is amazing because it's like, I don't want to lose this thing. I need to do it now. Instead, it's like, I don't need to do this now. I can set a waypoint, and then maybe when I feel more like doing all the shrines, I can teleport and go to all the shrines and do them all at once, which I think was really amazing for just being able to play for long periods of time under different mental states.
Yeah, and not just a waypoint, like you can set different kinds of waypoints. Like a lot of games are like, you can put up a marker on your map. Breath of the Wild is like, here's a rainbow of crayons that you can mark your map with. And if you have a system for that, you can totally use it. So kind of on the same thing, but from a different perspective, what is something in a game that you otherwise like that doesn't work for you? So for me, it's Destiny. I love Destiny. I've played so much Destiny. I've played since the alpha. I adore that game. But oh my god, I spend 45 minutes every time I go to the tower because I'm like, there are like 10 different NPCs. They all have different kinds of bounties. This one wants me to do strikes, but this one wants me to do gambit. This one wants me to use submachine guns, and this one wants me to use linear fusion rifles. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I have like 10 different exotic quests, and a story quest, and a weekly quest, and this thing expires tomorrow, and this thing expires this afternoon. Do not like the bounty system in Destiny. Drives me nuts. But I love the game. What's something that you don't like, and why don't you like it? But it has to be a game that you otherwise do enjoy.
I think a big one for me is I love Animal Crossing so much. But in New Horizons, the system of spiders coming out at night was like a huge disservice, I think, because well, with PTSD, it's interesting because it heightens your other anxieties. So like my PTSD isn't about spiders, but spiders increases my anxiety, which increases the susceptibility to get more panic attacks. And I am also a night owl, so I would mostly be playing at night, and I actually started time traveling because I never wanted to play at night. There wasn't things you could make like safe spots. At some point, once you can terraform, you can kind of make them, but even then, like you really have to do workarounds. And they're just constant. And they're terrifying and gigantic, and they actually hurt you in the game. So, like, more than just being like, oh, that's kind of gross, like, I don't want to see a spider, it's like, this thing's going to attack me, which is not great for my spider fear that I'm trying to work on. So I just thought that was a big thing, too, was completely off theme. Because nothing else in the game can hurt you, nothing else in the game is off-putting. So, unlike when you kind of opt into something like that with a terrifying, Silent Hill, I wouldn't be mad if there were spiders. Of course, they're going to terrify me. But when you opt into a cute, calming game, and then there's just one thing that you can't opt out of that completely kind of ruins that experience, is bad.
Alana, it sounded like you had something to say.
Yeah. I was going to just mention that I can't play MMOs, and everyone keeps telling me, oh, try this one. No, I cannot. They don't end. I need games that end. Yes. I need an endpoint. It's okay.
For that.
Yeah, I need to be able to 100% complete it, but at the very least, have a game to finish, because if it doesn't finish, then I don't sleep, and then it triggers mania, and then I'm up for 6 days trying to finish the game. RuneScape doesn't end. It's fun, it's great, but there's no endpoint. There's none. So there's nothing that tells me, okay, it's human time to end games.
It sounds like you never get that serotonin and dopamine hit from like achievement unlocked or like game over in a positive way, or like
maybe. I mean, I think it's more of because there's no final task. There's just like the end and we're over and deep breath out. It's like, because I like with RuneScape, I used to love the evil trees, and I would, every half an hour, or hour and a half, a new evil tree would spawn, and I would go, and I was in guilds. I was a guild leader, but I can't do MMOs, and people don't get that. And even though I tell them, I appreciate that you love that game so much, I can't. I'm sorry.
I understand that problem with, like, without the end goal, like, it's very anxiety inducing that you can just never quite get there. Or same with Destiny. I had that, like, those same issues, Jake, where I really enjoy the game. I love playing it with friends, but I can't keep up. And every time I go, there's more and more stuff shoveled at me, and tower taxes take longer and longer until, like, it takes me an hour of sitting down to, like, deal with all this glut of stuff. And I'm like, is any of this important? Can't I just hit a button that's like, sell all the shit? I mean, stuff.
Kartik, what were you about to say earlier?
Sorry, was that to me?
Yeah, you said.
Oh, yeah. Well, I feel bad now because now two people have talked about Destiny, but Destiny was what I was also going to mention, because it is a game that I love. I played quite a lot of Destiny, but I think there were two things that I was going to mention. One of them, Elena already mentioned, which is the completionary nature of MMOs, which I also really like seeing a progress bar go to 100%, especially when the entire game is done and I can put it away and feel content. But the other part that I wanted to mention was being someone who definitely spends a lot of energy talking to other people, more so than gains energy from talking to other people, even if they're my best friends. I find there's a lot of content I really wish I could participate in that I feel locked out of, like raids. That is too many hours for me to be on the voice chat with other people, even if they are my closest friends. And some parts of the content, I remember the very first raid, I only very recently finished it because me and my friends would keep dropping in and failing on the same encounter over and over again because it would take so long to try. And by the time you're just starting to get good at it, my energy bar was completely spent. I can't keep playing this. I'm so sorry, friends, but maybe another time. And it's games that have maybe more like save points, or maybe easier places to exit where you feel like, hey, you know what, we made a chunk of progress today, but it's not a lost cause trying to complete this piece of content.
That's a huge thing to mention. Accessibility, not even just with neurodivergence, but making games that you can't play for short amounts of time and you can't pause. And it makes sense with a lot of online play you can't pause an online game, but there's so many single player games that just like do not allow you to save in the middle, which means that you either have to delete all the progress that you made. I mean, so many people have busy lives, especially with COVID. I'm sure a lot of people have kids at home, and even
I've got thought when we get to whenever Jake inevitably gives us the question of like, what feature do you want nuked from space? I have emotions.
That's our next question. That's our next prompt. So if you don't have anything to contribute for games that have features you don't like, well, let's do that first, and then we'll get to the other one.
Sorry, Kelsey, but were you finished with your point?
Oh, no,
I jumped in. I apologize for that. So I love the SteamWorld series, SteamWorld Quest, SteamWorld Heist, SteamWorld, all the things. Like, give me some steam-powered robots doing obscure things. You know what I really don't like? Cutscenes I can't skip after I've beaten them. Because right now I'm trying to grind up a little more money so that I can max out the cards before finishing the final boss. I've stopped before the final boss and I'm going, and there's a tree you have to kill at one point. And for those of you who don't know, it's a deck builder, like JRPG, basically.
It's very good.
Amazing. Highly recommend. SteamWorld Quest, SteamWorld Heist. Get the bundle. Get the bundle with the soundtrack. Just
We are not sponsored by SteamWorld Heist.
yeah,
Or Bungie.
I would love it. Yeah, I have nothing to do with those people. I just love their stuff. But I don't like how. So I've beaten the game except for the final boss battle, and the game is set up like a chapter book because it's medieval theme. When I go back, I'll fight basically a boss battle, this one tree, because it drops an item that I need that I'm mining. I can't skip a 7-minute cutscene, and I have to stand there, banging on the go faster button, or else it's like 10 minutes. I'm like, so I'm gonna sit at my computer banging on the go faster button. I just feel like I'm wasting time. Like, I understand forcing someone to watch the cutscene the first time, and I actually think that's kind of good design because then you don't accidentally exit out of it and miss a key plot point. But I really think it's bad design.
Always skippable.
I'm just saying from a design standpoint, like, because, speaking from not just design, not just from play experience, but design, like, I think that's a terrible idea. Like, how you already have a go faster button. How hard would it be? You're not loading anything in it because it's this chapter book thing. They're discrete. It's like in Mario, there's world 1-1, world 1-2, world 3. It's not like a game like Tomb Raider where you need to sneak loading some textures while she's squeezing through one of those little tunnels. You don't need to sneak load textures in an elevator like in Mass Effect. So I'm just like, why do I have to watch this? I've wasted hours of my life watching this tree die. Like, I killed it 45 times. I get it.
That's a pretty good lead into our next question. So,
Good job.
what features?
Can I do a really quick thing, Jay?
Yeah, go for it.
One, to Animal Crossing, I don't love the parental messages. Being estranged. Like, you get messages and packages from your parents.
Oh, like your fake
You
parents.
don't love I live for those.
Yeah, I'm estranged from my parents, so they are just a reminder of like how awful I feel every time they try to get in touch with me, and I'm why did you do that? You just ruined my day. I
wish you could turn that.
Actually, going back to Horizon, this is kind of an accessibility thing. It drives me crazy when games that have a lot of lore make it virtually impossible to read said lore. Control did a great job at this. I was able to, like, on a regular size screen from a regular distance, read everything just fine. And I have great eyesight. In Horizon Zero Dawn, it is impossible. I have to literally walk up to the thing, and I've gotten so fed up with it that I've just stopped reading it, even though I really, really like absorbing lore. And then save games, I'm glad they've gotten a lot better about that. But back in the days where you had to do all of your own saving, I would get stuck in cycles of saving and loading. BioShock, for instance. Yes, panic saving constantly.
Panic scum saving. You're not scum saving because you suck. You're scum saving because you're just compulsively hitting. I get this in Word documents.
I used up bullets.
Problem.
What if I need those? Load and use fewer bullets? Like, it got to a really extreme level, and I realized I was like, I got a problem. And so I had to deconstruct what was going on and come up with rules for myself and test the waters. Like, hey, just try getting through the level without loading every 2 seconds. Just try the whole thing. Maybe the designers thought about putting ammo and other things that you might need places in the future.
That's why I like Nintendo games, because I literally say out loud as I'm playing it, be like, it's okay, it's a Nintendo game. I trust Nintendo. They'll do me right. We're good.
Dark Souls you. Nintendo's is not good at Dark Souls.
I'm the other direction. I'm like, that's why I like roguelikes, because you can't hold on to anything. Everything's going to go away. You're going to die permanently. Don't optimize, because this run will be over in 20 minutes.
Depending on my mental state, that sounds like a
nihilistic approach. I like it.
I think that's why it's really important for games to stick with what your mental state should be at the time. Because again, if you have a Dark Souls game, you know what you're expecting, you're going into it wanting a certain type of play style. And if you're going into Animal Crossing, I do think it's interesting. I think a game like Animal Crossing should have many, many more content accessibility options, because it literally, its point is kind of to feel calming and to have this sort of mental state. So to have things where you can't turn them off, like the parental messages or like spiders, everything like that, I do think that games like that should be focusing a lot more on that. That's a big goal we have with our game. Is I want it to be a game that I can recommend to people that are going through the worst of PTSD, to be like, this is a safe game, like you can play it and feel calm and feel de-stressed. And I think there's an ethical dilemma of, can I do that accurately? Can I say like, yes, you will feel safe in this game?
Yeah.
And I think a lot more games should think about that.
Alana and I have talked about this, how we were talking to someone who works in PR, and he was like, hey, I had this game, it's right up your alley, XYZ. And Alana, if I remember correctly, you were like, oh, I've heard of that game, but
I also heard it could be triggering. Could you please give me the trigger warnings?
And he didn't have them on hand. He was like, here's what they told us. And
he did come back to me the next day, and they were very specific. And I was grateful about how specific the trigger warnings are, because if I wish that games could have a certain feature that would help me, it would be more specific trigger warnings. Because I would love to play so many games with extensive narrative-rich everything.
I'm just going to give the prompt now. What features do you want to see in games? Why are those important? Please. You're all jumping ahead.
Trigger warnings! I just
trigger
said
warnings.
it, Jake!
So there's a...
I'm getting a question out there.
There's a...
I didn't know. I was just talking. It's a panel.
What I'm hearing is Alana just did an incredibly natural, organic shift.
Yeah, Jake!
Point.
You're welcome for transitioning us so organically to your next question.
There's a there's a website out there. There's a website called Does the Dog Die? And you can look can look up a huge database of triggers that are triggering for you. Everything from like the dog dying to needles to infidelity to claustrophobia, like whatever ails you, whatever you don't want to see. You can look it up and be like, does this movie have that? And it won't tell you anything else about the movie that you don't want to know. It'll just be like, yes or no.
Yeah. So I'm getting
we need that for games.
I was getting flashbacks to BioShock when you were talking, Jake, because like that game, I love everything. I'm like, that game is my jam. And I mean like the BioShock that came out like 100 years ago, not this new nonsense. Like the first one that blew our brains, like before anyone knew who Ayn Rand was. And
Jesus.
We had to save all the time.
Yeah, the Scum Saver edition. But
that was my Scum Saver game.
And there was this whole thing. It was a meaty narrative. There was meaningful choice. And for those of you who are youth, back then that wasn't a thing. Mass Effect was not a thing yet. Like it was a big deal that like making choices would affect your ending so dramatically. And they were not obvious choices. It wasn't like eat the deep fried baby chick, eat tofu. Like you had like actual like
oddly specific.
Fable 1 is what I'm referencing. They had a very binary good evil
Wasn't
system.
the choice kill the little girls or not though?
Well, so there was like take the hit and nearly die from the big daddy, or like harvest the stuff you need to play the game from the little girl. It wasn't a cut and dry, like, so in Fable, which is where the deep fried chicks comes from, there's a whole morality system based on everything from what you eat to what you wear to who you talk to. And the famous one is if you eat deep fried baby chicks, you become more evil. It's a 15-point evil.
Chicken nuggets?
Chicken nuggets, yeah.
I love chicken
I love
nuggets.
chicken nuggets.
But so then they had this thing where like if you ate like unbleached, unseasoned tofu, it was 10 points of good on a 100-point scale. And
evil all the way, if those are my choices. Done.
Well, this is also a game where like your scars showed up on your body. It was one of the first games to ever do this. I know in 2020 that seems insane that not every game has this, but back in like 2000 and single digits, this was a thing. And then BioShock in 2000 and early single digits, it wasn't a cut and dried like KOTOR thing. This wasn't Knights of the Old Republic where it's like, oh, I used the red lightsaber, I'm evil. It's like, oh, do I harvest the thing that allows me to finish playing the game, or do I nearly die? Like, do I make harder choices? And often now it's got more complicated, and looking back, it looks very simplistic. I don't like looking at needles for a variety of reasons, but all you really need to know is I can't do needles, especially the idea of self-injecting. Like, I saw Trainspotting way too early in my life at a formative age, and like, no, thank you. Like, I don't handle getting blood taken very well. So I was always distressed because I couldn't play BioShock, which has every other thing I would love. Meaningful choice, morality, at the time, best in class graphics, like females that are actually useful. I'm looking at you, little sisters. Like a world, that game is a masterclass in world building. I could look around the world and learn the story instead of having it like, there once was a day, like at me. I could play because of this specific thing. I understand it's a very important mechanic. And I think part of this whole discussion isn't make every game good for me. It's know where you as a designer put that line. So like,
well,
now,
it's also knowing your audience, right? Know who your audience is going to play. Like one of my biggest things with game dev is when, like, not talking about like mental asylums and that being a horror game, but when they put mental illness into a game and they're trying to do it in a genuine way, but then they make it too triggering for the people with the mental illness to play said game. Like, who is your audience? Who is this game for? I think that's more what you're talking about, knowing who your audience is and your demographic, and can they play the game that you're playing to represent them? Okay, cool. So you're representing me in my game, but like, I can't play said game.
Celeste does a really good job with that. They actually did an interview with Game Maker's Toolkit about difficulty. So Celeste, hello cat. Celeste has an assist mode. So in assist mode, you can very granularly change the game. You can reduce the game speed. You can give yourself infinite air dashes. You can make your character invincible, so you like don't die to spikes and hazards and things. Like there's a lot of stuff. But when
I like it's called assist mode and not
I
easy
gonna
mode.
finish Celeste now?
Yeah, so like that's the point, is like when you try to access assist mode for the first time, they're like, hey, just so you know, we designed this game very intentionally. Like we spent a lot of time balancing exactly how the game feels, and that is the intended way to play. If for any reason you can't play the game like that, this was for you. We want you to be able to finish your game no matter who you are. We don't want you to be put off by difficulty, because difficulty, while being like the core design tenet of this thing, it's not precious to us. Like we don't have to have that.
Yeah, and I think there's such a big discussion around difficulty and accessibility, because a lot of people, they think it lessens the sense of accomplishment, but I think there are really, really easy ways to allow for that sense of accomplishment. Like, first of all, giving an option, like we used to have, Guitar Hero, you could say like, I need this on expert mode, and that's totally fine. Like, you can specify modes. It doesn't lessen it if someone beats it on easy mode easier, because you can still say that you beat it on expert mode. I think another thing too is being like, you get a special prize if you don't use any of the like skipping options or something. As long as you warn about that at the beginning, you say something like Celeste did of like, hey, like just to let you know, like this isn't exactly like, it won't do that. That's the other thing, is when you don't say that, you give those accessibility options and then you're like, oh, sorry, you used it once, you can't get the award now, all the way at the end.
Well, so building on that, I think Fight Crab did this really well. I'm not just saying because it's one I heard, but like I'm very bad at fighting games. For those of you who don't know, I'm atrocious with controllers. I have nerve damage in my hands. I can't get good. That's just not a physical option for me. I'm also an adult with a full-time job. So like, I don't have time.
Really?
I'm also over the age of 16, so my reflexes aren't where they used to be when I was a small child. But Fight Crab's really interesting. And going back to what Jake said about assist mode, so I am so bad at fighting games. And I have a friend, and she used to be on the fighting game circuit. So she's really good. And if we play co-op together, I'm mostly just running around, and she's like actually winning. But when I was playing by myself, it was a lot harder. And after I died 3 times, Fight Crab was like, do you want an assist? And it was a picture of a fighter jet with a crab on it. And I found out from asking someone who is running PR from the game, oh, it actually just airstrikes for you. Like a crab rides a fighter jet in and airstrikes. And some other levels where I was dying consistently, it was a really long-legged green crab. Like it basically tells you what kind of assist you're going to get. And it treats it almost like a finishing move. Like in Advanced Wars, it would be like, airstrike assist. Like you didn't feel bad for using it. And so going back to what Jake said about it, Celeste calling it an assist mode, I like that so much better than like easy
difficulty. Yeah.
I like how God, what was so Horizon Zero Dawn calls it story mode. There was a game that came out recently, a big time AAA game that everyone was like, well, this game was too easy. And it's like, bro, just go on normal difficulty like a normal person. Like there was, I forget which game it was, but it was Major Drama. I'm sure you can Google it. It was last month.
I remember that.
I don't remember what game it is, but I like how Fight Crab made it a feature, not a bug. Like they used a very old school technique of rubber banding, which Blue Shell Mario Kart is the most famous example of that. But it felt natural. I didn't feel humiliated. I never used the assist because I was like, I'm gonna do it. But I like that it didn't belittle me. It didn't say, like, by the way, we're slowing the game down.
The language is very
I would have
important.
almost wanted to because Crab on a fighter jet.
Like,
Exactly.
Jim and
Yeah.
Wolfenstein are both like, are you a baby? And I'm like, no, I'm not a baby. I'm
Yeah,
fucking
I mean, if we're
35.
talking about features to nuke from orbit, it definitely would be the easy difficulty for babies, where it says like, "Oh, are you really gonna?" And it's like,
Okay.
why are I'm a
We
fan?
need
I'm a
Junior.
player.
Don't Starve does a lot of
and
that.
Yeah, the phrasing of like you. This one's great for me. Is the phrasing where it says like, "You want to focus on the story," and I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, Horizon's flavor text is like, for players who want to enjoy the narrative and cinematic aspects without having to focus on the combat. I'm like, I'm gonna play it
Final
normal,
Fantasy
but
remake did that too.
Yeah.
Story, like, do you want
Yeah.
to focus on the story? Do you want to focus on the
Yeah.
combat? Story, please.
yeah. And one thing is, and this is, I don't know if it quite fits the prompt, but whatever. It's the prompt stepchild. Achievements. So Assassin's Creed 1 had this achievement where you had to talk to every single person, every single valuable NPC, like a named NPC in the game, and you got an achievement. It is a really clever use of achievement. I missed it because I didn't talk to the random girl in the lab when I went in for the first time, but that's okay because I'm like, fair. You got me, game. Like, it didn't feel dirty. Like, it didn't feel like shamed when I borked it. I feel like achievements these days are so mid-max. They're so linear. Like, completed the whole game without jumping. Like, made everything on first place for time trials. I'm like, time trials? I'm skipping all of those. I don't know how to drive cars in-game. I barely drive IRL.
Yeah.
But what I
As
think...
soon as you have to play through the entire game a second time just to get an achievement, I'm like, come on.
Those are really, I think those are incredibly
That's a scam.
anxiety-inducing.
Dark Souls
The
is
ones
3.
where you can lose it, you can miss it somewhere.
Yeah.
Do not like.
Or it's an area of the game that you can only access at that point. Like Paper Mario, the new one, has this one where one of the boss battles is on the 4th floor of this elevator thing. And me being me, and being a creationist and being me, I, of course, checked every nook and cranny before moving on to anything just in case I'd missed something. But then again, it's Nintendo and we trust Nintendo. And of course, they only put the only one that would have been like a later thing is on the 1st floor, which you can access all the time. So the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors that you can't access after that boss battle didn't have anything other than like heart items. I think it didn't have any of the big achievement things.
So
Yeah.
going back
Another
to
good example of a game that handles, like, you know, making completionism not feel like a chore and not feel inaccessible is I recently played a little bit of Doom Eternal, and their waypoint system, I think, does a pretty good job of unlocking when it's fair. Like, it doesn't immediately out the gate say, hey, yeah, you can go anywhere. It's after you've been through the entire area and you found this one thing, now you can go back to almost any other spot and pick up all the tiny little lore bits you might have missed along the way without having to, hold on, let me start this entire level over because I missed one little lore piece in this one little spot over here. I think those kind of features are on the scale of features that are often discussed by people like, oh, this is a lot of effort, we can't do this. That is relatively low-hanging fruit, I think.
Well, and like, speaking of low-hanging fruit and achievements, I miss when achievements were like, did 3 backflips in a row. Like, I played Fall Guys recently, and they had an achievement for like, still qualified even though you fell off the stage over 10 times. And I'm like, yes, thank you.
Failure achievements? That's awesome.
Yeah, failure achievements are
I
great.
think failed achievements are great, but also
I
like,
agree.
like, petted all the foxes, like, I don't know, ate all the donuts. Like, I feel like achievements in my soul are weird things that make you explore and play with the edges of the game to get the shinies. Like, did 3 barrel rolls and then like flipped a donut into the air. Seems like a reasonable achievement for me. Completed everything on 100%. Like, I think you're basically...
I like when they turn it into like mini games. Like,
Yeah.
just kind of little mini games I can play within the structure of the game itself. Not playing the entire game again, but like, do this thing in this slightly structured way which is going to change how you approach, like whether it's enemies or a space, than how you would normally while you play.
And a
Go-
time
You know who
trial
did that
is
really
not
well?
enough.
Goose Game. Goose Game, all of the achievements were basically like achievements. Like the whole game was just a list of achievements of random things, like where you had to go inside and put yourself on the security camera. That was so
Yeah.
clever. And I
That's
felt
an
so smart
achievement.
doing it.
Absolutely.
And then
Right.
learning that you had to untie the kid's shoelaces in order to get his glasses off to switch them. I felt so smart playing that game. It was so
Poor
well
kid.
done.
And that goes back to design fundamentals, though. Like, is it easy to design from the bottom up or from the top down? Like, when you make design choices, because design, in my opinion, is all about the choices you make. And for those of you just joining us, I'm former AAA dev, former indie dev. So like I've seen design for like multi-year projects, and I've seen design for multi-minute projects, and like those are terrible. But like we make these choices when we design the underpinnings of our games before anything's coded, before any assets are made, before, you know. And Jerry, I think you could talk a lot to this because you deal with alt control and you deal with like physical game a lot.
Yeah.
Like you have to make blueprints and stuff. You don't just get to let's code it and see what happens, because you're like, excuse me, I need to see if I can hot glue this wood together. And like Jake, you have a lot of experience with like precision printing and stuff. So I'm assuming you also have opinions about designing from the bottom up. Like, it's easy to put these things in day one. It's really hard day 101. But maybe
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point about accessibility. Is I know a lot of people who are like, we'll make the whole game and then we'll figure it out later. But a lot of the points we've made have to do with like core design and have to be in the beginning processes of when you're making the game.
And
You can't glue it all on.
We've only got a few
Definitely.
minutes left, and there's a couple more prompts I'd like to get through.
sorry.
So, two more. We'll do two more questions. Do you feel well represented in games?
Move on. Let's
Can
go.
you think of games that represent you well? And what would you want to see represented differently? So I'll start if you want. So I've been playing Control. I love Control. If you haven't played Control, it's great. And there's this really interesting part of Control where, so like you play as Jessie Faden. She goes into this laboratory military thing, and there's a lot of weird stuff that happens. It's a paranormal research lab, and all of reality is like up for grabs. The place shifts itself around. You get like telekinetic powers. Like there's all kinds of stuff. And there's this underlying premise of everybody that you talk to in the facility who works there of, I believe you. You tell these stories of like, this whole horrible thing happened in my childhood, and they're like, oh yeah, like we have a file on that, let me get back to you. And I feel like that is like, oh my god, I've been through trauma, and it feels really nice to have a circumstance where that feels like going to a therapy session. I feel like that's a good representation of what traumatic events are actually like.
I think Final Fantasy VII Remake did a fairly good job with PTSD trigger points. I didn't play the original, so I don't know how much of the original was infused in that or how different it was. But I remember playing Final Fantasy VII and my partner who doesn't have PTSD, and Cloud would have a moment, and I'd be like, all right, this was wrong about that, but that, you know, like that visually, that's on point.
Yeah, I think the difficulty is, I mean, with Neurodivergent, a lot of it would be more in narrative games. There's a lot you have to describe or talk through, which can be difficult. I think one physical thing is that I really enjoy is when characters are visibly scared of their surroundings, because I'm like, yes, thank you. It's not just like this this like meaty person going around and being like, I don't care that like I almost died like 15,000 times. But also I'd personally love to see more characters where they forget things and it's not seen as like, oh, this person's lazy and I hate them. It's more just like, oh, I thank you for apologizing. Like, I accept your apology for that. Things that you're kind of accepting people as they are, and also maybe like someone else is really scared of a situation and you don't know why, but you accept that as well. Like, I would love that for like even escort quests. You have someone with you. Maybe you're not scared of the spiders, but that person is. I think that'd be nice.
I feel like the easy one for me to answer for this question is Celeste. I think I remember playing that, and some of the way that anxiety was talked about in that game, like, literally brought tears to my eyes so quickly. And I my immediate reaction after that was, why did I react so viscerally to this? And I realized, oh, I don't think I've ever seen a game speak so candidly about this before, and that was why I was just so overwhelmed to see that talked about that way. And then that, and I think this has already been mentioned before during this panel, but I feel like a lot of times these games that are supposed to be representative of neurodivergence end up not being accessible to those same people. This was a game that managed to do both at the same time, which is extremely rare. I think it's one of the best examples I could possibly think of.
So I think the overall answer is no, we're not well represented, because when we are, that's like a very powerful experience, and like it stands out because you see all the other times that.
Well, I was gonna say, I think Jerry had a.
Yeah, that's your turn.
Yeah, I had just a couple of really quick ones. One is just kind of a moment I had. I had recently, recently played through all of the Uncharted games. I had just never gotten to them, so I just flew through them all recently. And in number 4, I actually really liked how they approached Nathan and his wife's relationship. And Nathan's obsession with the treasure hunting and obsession with his work. And that's something that like happens to me a lot. I get very obsessive with my projects. And I think that's very much a part of my like neurodivergent brain. And that is like very much a challenge for me and my marriage, and figuring out how to set boundaries. And like in that, like there was a stuff that like for me was very emotional, of like, oh man, this feels really real. So I liked that aspect of it, and leading toward the end of the game, and also that there was a happy ending. But also I played Tangle Tower with my wife recently, and I did really like, Kelsey, you mentioned kind of allowance for being forgetful, or not maybe being good at everything, but like still having value. And I liked the representation of the primary characters, like Grimoire. Like I feel like I connected with that character because he's a bit all over the place and very forgetful and not putting things together the way other people expect, but he is like bringing like value to the process of solving that mystery, and even though he does it in a very different way than the other characters. But those are 2 that came to my mind.
I kind of have a hack together answer. Luigi's Mansion. Luigi is the everyman. Luigi is scared. Luigi talks to himself. Luigi does not want to be at the mansion. Luigi, through all 3 games, really regrets buying this vacuum cleaner. And like his interaction with the mad scientist doctor guy, Spooky or whatever his name is, and like when he goes into a boss battle, like Mario's like, oh, Luigi's like, oh no, and he's like clutching the, he's clutching his little vacuum. He's like, oh, and then like Boo is like popping out of the portrait. And I think that's really good, going back to what Kelsey said about like, you're allowed to be scared. Like it was much more digestible to me. And the other one is The Sims. So not just the life simulator from the creators of SimCity, but Sims Online had a tagline, be somebody, period, else, period. And I really liked that. I liked that, and I did not like The Sims Online. I like that tagline as it applies to The Sims 2, same era of gameplay, etc. Because your sim was a witch today, cool, look in the paper. Now your sim is, especially if you got all the expansion packs, now your sim is really good at canning baked goods, can grow a vegetable patch, but is also a highfalutin corporate lawyer. Like, I didn't have to pick. I could do all the things. And in real life, if you're not a particular demographic, you don't get to do all the things. You have to choose. And I like that I could do all the things. And to answer your question, no, I don't think I feel represented in games because there are too many male protagonists.
That's a different panel, but I hear you. All right, I have one more that I really want to cover before we're out of time. What is a common misunderstanding about neurodivergence that you'd like to correct? And what sort of implication does that have on games? So, like, for me, I played Assassin's Creed 2, and you meet Da Vinci, and Da Vinci is just like this brilliant inventor, and you're like, I needed this, that, or the next thing. And he's like, I got you. But that's not what Da Vinci was like. He's like prototypical ADHD. He had tons of dead projects. He could never meet deadlines. Everyone was always mad at him for not being able to finish his stuff. And he kind of just went from one obsession to another, and it was extremely unreliable. And I'm like, yes, like that's it. ADHD isn't just I can't focus on anything. It's I don't choose what I focus on. And so maybe today I'm a painter, and tomorrow I'm a sculptor, and the next day I'm an inventor. And if you need me to be an inventor today, no, today's painter day. I can't do that. But I don't think that is done well in that particular
Oh, that
game.
rep would have been so much cooler.
So,
I can go next.
yeah,
Oh,
common misunderstandings. How would you correct that?
well, I think a big thing with ADHD, actually all neurodivergence, is that with neurotypical people, you associate certain actions with rudeness. You think this person is doing this because they don't care about what I'm saying or doing, or they didn't care about this thing, so they relate to it. Whereas neurodivergence totally flips that. It's like, no, I didn't because I couldn't. And there are a lot of things that we think about that. It's like, oh, you didn't get food poisoning because you chose to. You just got food poisoning. You didn't want to miss my whatever. I think that's a huge thing that I would love to see changed in the future, is understanding that with different people, rudeness is not always the same thing. Being late, I mean, I constantly forget to do things that I'm in love with. I remember I was too tired one time to go to the final day of camp where they had a big party and like everything and like cake and fireworks and stuff. It was the worst thing in the world. So obviously I didn't also choose to miss like something that was important to somebody else. I would love to see that shown in characters.
I think I would like to see just the association of neurodivergence to weakness eliminated in games. I think that is oftentimes the easiest thing that a lot of games do when they're not thinking about it. And they seem so naive, or they seem so innocent at the time when you make that design decision, but you aren't really thinking about, real people with those symptoms and how they interpret that. And I think that's, to me, just the biggest. There are a lot of things you can turn into a weakness in a game. Neurodivergence shouldn't be one of them.
I have a big answer. So there's two parts to it. Part one is neurodivergence isn't necessarily a permanent state for everybody. It can be can be triggered by stuff in your life. Like postpartum depression is the famous one. Like you can get depressed just because you had a baby. Like that happens and then it goes away eventually, or it doesn't. Like just someone who is very smart and knowledgeable on the subject recently told me your disability isn't necessarily forever. It might just be for now. And this is very recent that I was told this. And I was like, yes, that 10 points to Gryffindor. But then the other thing is destigmatization of medication. Someone puts on so you all still respect me if I put on my reading glasses. I'm like, hey, I can't see unless I have this medically prescribed device. But I only use it when I have to work on the computer. Nobody's they're like, yeah, wear your glasses, dude. Do you need I don't know, saline solution? You rub them. Glasses are the thing, because it's not like prosthetic limbs. It's not like, I like to use glasses and insulin as the example. You'd never tell a diabetic, well, you're going to get off the insulin eventually, right?
Right.
You say can you just not take your insulin? Why do you depend on that? And the other one is glasses. It is nothing to see someone with glasses. When you go skydiving with them, you're like, hey, do you need special? And they go, nah. Or you go scuba diving with them, you go, do you need special? And they go, oh, I have prescription goggles.
Right.
It's normal. And I think we should destigmatize medication that is used for neurodivergent needs, whether it's Zoloft or whatever. Because that's bullpucky. And even if someone needs it temporarily, like I have a friend who got out of an abusive relationship and she was an alcoholic at the time. And she went on antidepressants for 4 months to get her over the hump, because getting rid of both of those things, a terrible +1 and an alcohol addiction at the same time,
It's hard.
You need some help. So, but like she couldn't tell people about it because because people would like be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're putting that in your brain. It's like, dude.
Meanwhile,
like,
she's making the right step. Instead of depending on alcohol as her drug of choice, she's switching to something that's prescribed and medicated by a doctor, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and but here's the thing, it was a temporary state. Like she's not depressed forever. She just needed a buff. She needed to, she's a little buff.
Any more common misunderstandings people would like to correct before we are done?
I mean, I really hate the like tortured artist.
Me too.
Oh my God, yes.
I think that's really awful because, especially somebody that can very easily fall into being a workaholic. And one of the mantras I used to have was, if you're already miserable, you might as well get stuff done. And so basically I would just grind myself into the ground, like getting things done and accomplishing a bunch, except it wasn't always great stuff. In fact, it usually took a lot longer to refine that work, and I was miserable the whole time. So because I wasn't able to like take care of myself properly, and I was taking that approach, like it wasn't genius work getting done. It was like very uneven work that I was not like enjoying the process of, and therefore is going to impediment my future ability to do work. And that's something I've been working really hard to get out of like, I need to find a way to be enjoying the journey and to be healthier while I do it. My creativity is not going to suddenly dissolve and disappear because like I'm not miserable every second. Like that's just not the way it works. It can be good to use like past traumas and past like things that you're trying to deal with as a like part of your process, but there's a very important distinction of like, is it actually helping you deal with this thing? Are you doing that for yourself? And like some of the projects I made over the last couple of years were specifically to help like my own brain and like deal with how normal meditation doesn't work for me. So like I developed procedurally generated nature scenes, like because that was something that helped me at the time actually feel better, and like had the byproduct of actually making like other people feel better, which was great. But
We have time for Alana's answer, and then we are done. If you have anything you want to talk
Well, no
about.
pressure. Sure. I'll just say that when you see accurate representation of something that you're going through, that you're struggling with, not only is it really powerful for the people that see themselves in it, but it also, if you do it accurately, shows that character as a whole realized person. And after a person who doesn't understand sees a whole realized person, whether it be in games or other media, you can't turn that off. You can't go back to not knowing. So all we need is a couple of big hits to do this properly and accurately, and people will see neurodivergent people as whole realized people, and that's all when it comes to game dev is necessary. You don't need to make a big masterpiece, just an accurate, truthful representation.
I don't think we could ask for a better ending to the panel. That was really well done. Thank you everyone for coming to watch us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your PAX Online. Bye.